Hello there, chaps. So, first search back on again. There would have been no swearing in this one. Well, so I'm looking around the internet and I'm looking at people trying to work out what's going on with Israel and all that kind of malarkey and where's Trump's stand in relation to Israel. I think it's pretty obvious. Everything around him is Israel, and he's been made no secret of the fact that he's in full support of Israel. In fact, some of his speeches have been a bit odd in relation to his ties to Israel. And of course, everybody suggests, well, Israel, that's Jews. That's Jews, that. Well, it's definitely captured those who claim to be Jewish. That's a fact. Whether its core leadership is Jewish, I would say is definitely open to a big question. Especially when you consider a big chunk of those in Israel are actually from Russia. I have also seen reports that in Israel itself they're questioning now the fact that who are these people that have come from Russia, because they're not actually Jewish. So they're making a claim of it, but they're certainly not existing in it, as it were. So we've definitely got a lot of issues that just tend to get thrown into the back room. I will not talk about that. Well, because rightly so. It's a dangerous subject because people get excited. You know, you're dealing with race, you're dealing with culture, you're dealing with religion here, and that gets people a bit excited. But I think, you know, as grown-ups, these kind of topics have to be looked at. They have to be debated. Information has to be put into the mix so that people remember certain things when you're looking at just what's actually going on. So we're looking at the West, obviously, which is where I live. So obviously that's the only point of the world that matters to me. But you know, and if you go back to 909 AD, so you're just after King Alfred time in England, claimed to be a Saxon, more than likely of the Trojan. It's a bit of a misnomer going on with the idea that there were Saxons to the amount they tell us here back in the day. They seem to be hiding the fact that a lot of the tribes back in that time when the Vikings started to invade were actually tribes that had been from Troy direct or appendages of Troy, and when Troy fell, a lot of them came over here. Previous to that, we'd had the Scythians, the genuine ones, they'd come, and previous to that it was the races that existed in what we now call Turkey, which is the origin and reason St. George is tied to England, when in fact he was when he lived, he was actually in Cappadocia in Turkey. So, you know, there's a lot of hidden going on in relation to who the original people on these isles actually are. We're not going into that. Suffice to say, 909 AD, so you've had King Alfred. The Viking Wars are supposed to a point to sort of settling down, etc. And in Burgundy now, so we're over in France. At Cluny in particular, the Carolingian warrior caste, who were the bloodline supposed to have succeeded the Merovingians, they started to move their offspring that weren't the firstborn, and therefore primogeniture being in place, the children that weren't getting anything basically began to be pushed or chose to go into the monasteries. And what appeared to happen from 909 up to maybe the tail end of the 900s was a shift in certain theology within the monastic order. And one of the most important was the reversal of the Benedictine doctrines on land ownership and property ownership by the church, which it was not to do. It was all about donations and things being given to the church to be held in trust. So to ensure that everybody in those areas could use all the land, all the industry, together for their own needs. So that was the original ethos. That was then reversed in the monasteries under the watch of the Carolingians, or Carolingians, whichever way you want to say it. So by the time we got to the end of 900s, they really started to operate this new system whereby they were accumulating land and property to themselves. In opposition to that came the Cistercians, another monastic order, as it were, who were sort of opposing what the Burgundians had done and were claiming to be a more in tune with the original theology of the church than this was being birthed in Burgundy. Suffice to say, towards another couple of centuries on, these Cistercians became a hell of a lot worse a version of what it was they set off to actually oppose. So what I'm trying to get across with that is the changes that went on in Christianity were carried out in the monasteries, not so much the church itself. The monasteries changed Christendom in relation to how it dealt with trade, commerce, etc. On what they formed in that period, they launched on England in the 1066 invasion from France. Now, what that did was it brought over all the moneylenders to England, who then immediately, under royal decree, launched usury, money lending, etc. And the same went in France as well at the same time, because this came under royal decree now under William the Bastard, as he was known back in the day. So that's basically what happened from 909 to 1066. The result of the changes gave them the feudal system, and they promptly implemented it all over England. So if we move forward from that, then these knightly orders that were the monasteries then obviously concocted the Crusades. There were many reasons for it, but one of them that they capitalised on was, as those landed gentry, etc., decided to go off or were encouraged to go off to crusade, the mechanic that was employed was that they would sign away their estates on trust to somebody they trusted, go off to crusade, and then of course you get in your idea Robin Hood and what the sheriffs were up to, which was basically encouraging those that had been that were holding the lands in trust to hand them over to the state, as it were. So basically the Templars got pissed off because when they came back, not just in England but across Europe, in most cases they found that their estates had been stolen. And this is, again, is I would put and cite as down to the monasteries, the mechanics going on with the monasteries in relation to securing land and property to themselves. As I said, a reversal of the original Benedictine doctrine. So you can see then that the monasteries are in opposition to trade, because they're accumulating monopoly from that point on. So as the Crusades go on, obviously the Templars are then becoming their own force. They're doing pact with Saladin, and of course they've been given the temple treasures, which help them create and form the banking system. Now there's some interesting stuff that we can go into after if you want in relation to who, though the Templars were given the knowledge, it was these people in particular that still held the keys to an understanding of the cross. So basically what that format's telling us is that although the Templars became very powerful, there was another force controlling the Templars, in that they were the force that led them to the treasure and showed them how to use it to a certain point. Obviously not giving them everything, otherwise it would have cancelled out the power these other people have, and still have, over this entire charade, which in my opinion suggests that something other than the Hebrew tradition has been controlling the Hebrew tradition since at least the Crusade days. And that encouraging the Crusades in the first place has been the means to that complete shift and change. And on the back of the Crusades, rather than being an incursion into the Middle East came back on the back of what had been done, etc. So land changed, property changed, everything was changing back home in Britain and France and Europe in general, and any nation that were involved in these Crusades. So they brought back the banking system, as we know it, with credit, issuing credit, etc., etc. So the story goes, they were then attacked because a king and a pope wanted the wealth. It doesn't actually add up to that when you really, really get into studying the mechanics that were going on there that time. In fact, if anything, it would present the idea that one force, either Templar or French royalty, that force, gained the upper hand over the other. It probably was that the Templar did gain quite an upper hand in this after, and Robert the Bruce encouraged and invited the Templars to Scotland, from where they would then attack the British crown through the Presbyterian Whigamores, who were the force that moved against Charles I, who were known as the Whigs, and their opponents were the Tories, or Catholic bandits as they were then called, who would change it to Conservative when it became a political battle. But the Whigamores, make no mistake about it, are the Templars, they are the bankers, they are the European powers, as opposed to the powers natural to England and Scotland. Edward I, interesting guy, he expelled all the moneylenders, or at least the majority of them anyway, 2,000 of them I think, and began to build a Christian Britain, and he was opposing the Templars in Scotland, which is why he was building the castles, etc. And he was also fighting the incursion into what we now call North Wales. Interestingly, Wales wasn't Wales until 1707. It was actually classed as England. Not a lot of people know that. So you Welsh guys, what are you talking about, you nutters? You're still fighting on ancient shit, you know. We know in English history that there was a move against the monastic system, the abbeys, etc., for a long time, way before Henry VIII. And that's again contrary to a lot of people's understanding that the fight against the monasteries were quite an old, ongoing struggle. Henry VIII just finished it off, basically, what had actually been going on. And I can well understand that in those times, people were not happy with these monasteries because they were just basically robbing, stealing by using the idea that, if you want to save your soul, you better hand us over this, that, the other. It's very clever how it began, but that's where it ended up. I think what actually happened, obviously, was the church did get tied in, as particular families from these Carolingian families got their people in as popes. That again continued through the financiers in Lombardy, Florence, the Medici, for instance. They sort of tapped into the Vatican money and ended up where the Vatican owed them money. They had their own two popes, a very powerful family, the Medici. And they were financiers. There's nothing hidden about this. And when you look at the Medici, you've got others. You've got Farnese, you've got Aldobrandini, you've got Breakspear, you've got Orsini. These are the families that were operating as all the big powerful families back in the day. And this is after the Crusades, of course. This is also after the Templars have been sort of thwarted or split up and hidden, is more what I'd suggest as went on. It became the secret societies, if you will, I would suggest. The church having the oldest as the Knights of Malta. So obviously the Templars as secret societies were always going to be opposed by the original Knights of Malta because they did represent the church. And then, of course, I would suggest, without a shadow of a doubt, that the reintroduction of the Templar came when they introduced the Society of Jesus, which is what I'm going to discuss now, because there's a lot about the Jesuits that people don't know. And you've got two options, really, when you look at this. You've either got the fire and brimstone of one particular guy in America, very Puritan, blah, blah, blah. It's a bit too much, is all I can say. So you've either got that version of who they are, or you can look at it in another method and see that the head of what was the Jesuits, or is, rather, was the highest aspect of what you could say was the Templars, using all their knowledge that they'd claimed from the temple treasure in relation to Solomon's secrets, launching themselves again as a Catholic order in order that they could mingle with the Knights of Malta as opposed to being opposed to them. So the Society of Jesus was formed. Let's have a look here. It's they actually refer to themselves as the company, a bit like the British monarchy refer to themselves as the firm. So these are terms you need to recognise as well, because this is backroom reality. Was formed from the different monastic orders existent in the 1500s by Francis Borgia, who was commissioned by Alessandro Farnese. Now, Farnese, again, and Borgia are families that we would now interconnect with the Holy See. Yeah? So, can you see that all this is going on, and it does involve the church, as it were, but all these shenanigans that we all now know we're not playing ball properly are around the church, rather than being it, if you will. And so the power play is going on, Holy See, through these monasteries, etc., around the church, because of course the church holds all title in the West. It's very important that people grasp why it's important that they've destroyed Rome itself in our eyes. It's because they need to put a cover over the fact that through these titles, through Rome having titles, by taking it over, creating the secondary title, the birth certificate, places all the titles under Rome, outside of Rome, and they'll be moved into this Noahide law platform that's going to be run by Israel. Now, back to what I said before about Israel, is it really Jews that are actually running Israel? Well, no, I don't think it is. I would suggest it's these people at the back end that we'll get into later, that are adamant that they're the ones controlling the Templars because they're working for that and them, that system. And so I'd say that what Israel is going to become is the new centre for this secret society system that is like a parasite on everything that we create as man. So it's a parasitic mechanic. And Israel is going to be the third temple. Yeah. Now, the last temple, King Cyrus emancipated 60,000 of those in captive to build a temple for Cyrus. Cyrus was a Babylonian. Yeah. Can you see what I'm saying? It wasn't Solomon's temple. This is King Cyrus, Babylonian. Finally killed by a Scythian woman. So Cyrus wasn't a nice guy at all. And when you study him and Esther, not good. Anyway, suffice to say, we're in that position again because President Trump is being put up as King Cyrus. So what does that tell you? It says that in the eyes of this priesthood, and I'm not saying it's Jewish people, I know Jews are tied into it, but then so are Christians through Christian Zionism, and so are the Muslims through the kafir system, or the kafir Sharia that's been created. Because the Sharia today is based on the false claim and idea that the Quran divides itself into the house of war and the house of peace, and it does not do any such thing. And that the Sharia today is being built entirely on the basis of this fantasy separate house of war. So they're using that mechanic to make people think the Sharia, to make the Muslims believe that it's of the Sharia, it's of the Quran, when in fact it isn't. It's not it's not. It really, you need to understand that, chaps, you Muslims, it's kafir. And if you follow it and keep following it, you're going to be in some serious spiritual trouble because you're not actually abiding the book. And you know yourselves what the sentences are for kafir. It isn't funny, and you certainly don't want to be moved into that direction yourselves, as of the Christian Zionists and as of the Hebrews, the Jews. They've been shifted and dragged into this nonsense as well. So the idea is for this new system to be based in Israel. So look at what they're doing now. They're using this lockdown to implement a military state, break up the supply chains, program you guys to quarantine at command, you know what I'm saying, mass vaccinations. You know what I'm saying? That's first phase. Second phase is going to be a bit different, and it's going to be aimed more around your children. They've isolated the pensioners. They want to do the same with the children now, and we're not going to get into this on this one, but you really need to start getting a grip of what is going on and plan to be going on in these schools when they go back after this lockdown. They are destroying the United Nations. So now they're blaming the World Health Organization for everything. Now, when the World Health Organization called down pandemic, there was a lot of reports about the fact that they'd been blackmailed into doing so. It wasn't a genuine call down of pandemic. They were forced to call a pandemic. You might want to seek them out. I've seen them myself, so they are there, they do exist. And they got washed away, nobody saw that again later. So you can see also now that this drive to censor this new world government, once they've disbanded the United Nations and its satellites, is to be formed in Israel, and it's to be run by the Sanhedrin, which is a priesthood, under the Noahide law platform, which has over 300 sub-laws, which when you you can start to see what's going to go on with that. Everything they're telling you about the Noahide platform now, i.e. it says that it doesn't see Islam as idolatry. Believe you me, Maimonides, and he's very clear that, believe you me, they do see Islam as idolatry in the same way they see Christianity as idolatry. So if this shifts into place, the Masonic degree, 21st degree Prussian Knight, is the Noahide judge in Christendom on behalf of this system. Successive governments have signed every year, and they have to sign every year. You see presidents doing it, you see that they are in support of this Noahide platform as opposed to any Christian platform and Roman platform. So they've got the title ready to shift into this new platform, which means you're all then slaves under that platform, under contract, so that's legal. So you've got them using the Vatican to move the titles. Yeah. They are now using this vaccine malarkey to undermine the United Nations. Now, don't get me wrong, the United Nations has undermined itself since its inception. It's not a good operation at all, but it's a world government, and it's a world government for the banks. So it can't be good in any respect. But you have to be aware of what's actually happening with that. They're trying to dismantle it so that they can create a new in Israel. Again, who is it that controls Israel? It's not the Jewish people. And I think the Jewish people are starting to realise that now. So we can see a lot of moves here where everything's now taken from everywhere, pulling it into Israel. So that's all the technology. You know, all the technology today, the processors have processors in them, and they're only accessible through Israel. You know, they enter my Mac at will. Believe you me, it's not funny. They enter my system at will. That's the new stuff. These are the new processors created by Israel, yeah, for Israel, not for us. So who does Israel represent? Well, I would say it's this global secret society, which is administered by the Committee of 300, above nations. That's the supranational Committee of 300 of the biggest psychopaths from each nation. You know, George Bush Senior was on it. Bill Clinton's on it. So forget Hillary getting locked up. You know, that's not going to happen. It's his missus. You know, I don't think Trump's got a seat. Queen's got a seat. I think Charles has got a seat. So it's all the serious players who are operating for this front system, this back-end secret society system. And the more obtuse and extreme you are, the more chance you've got to actually get a seat on the committee. Let's get back to the Society of Jesus. And they were created by Alexander of Farnese to create the Society of Jesus as a new Templar military force. So again, like I said, the original one is the Knights of Malta. That's a very ancient order, and it was truly Christian. And when they formed the Society of Jesus, it was done in such a way so it didn't show itself as Templar, and it had to come through the Vatican, or otherwise it wouldn't have been accepted by the Knights of Malta as a fellow order. Francis Borgia was the great-grandson of King Ferdinand II of Aragon, and Ignatius Loyola, who set up the Society of Jesus, was one of his men. So he was one of his men, so King Ferdinand II of Aragon. And it was created at the time of the Renaissance to support it. So the secret societies have done the crusade, the Templars have been so-called blah blah blah, shoved in the sidelines. So they've took all the temple treasure, so that's not just treasures as in gold and silver, it's mainly knowledge, it's information, how to set up systems, how to run, how to infiltrate, how to everything that you would expect from a psychopath. And how to set up the banking, how to to put people in debt and under your wing, as it were. So we're talking empire treasure. So it was, what they were doing at that point was creating secret societies so that they would encourage the best of the general public, so that they could control them. And so they had to release a program whereby they would give out just enough information to get everybody excited. And of course, when they were doing this, your lodges would have shows. They were dragging everybody into this. Come and look at us, we have secret knowledge. So we had the Renaissance. Art's being pulled out, which I don't believe there's anything wrong with art. Art's fantastic. You don't worship art. You enjoy it. You enjoy doing it. And people appreciate looking at it. That's not any kind of worship. It's certainly not idolatry. So I don't have a problem with art at all. In fact, I'm a musician. I create. I like it. It's good. It's a good way of expressing yourself. So they're being formed at the time the Renaissance is being released, which is, as I've said, it's the pull from the general public to the secret societies. Come and look at us. We've got secret knowledge. We'll give you a little bit, and then they stop. If you want any more, you've got to join. Yeah, that's how this was started. And obviously, what they're using is the information, the knowledge that they found in the treasure that they discovered during the Crusades. And it was created, there was a council of 10 families that dictated terms specifically to the Society of Jesus. And they are Farnese, Borgia, Colonna, Gattione, Medici, Pamphile, Orsini, Aldobrandini, Chigi and Conte. So they're the 10 families that the Society of Jesus was going to operate for. Okay, that's exactly what that was all about. And as I said, so you can see this coming from the Carolingians through the monastic orders. So there's a separation, and they had to get access to be accepted by the Knights of Malta in order that they could play in the same playing field as the Knights of Malta. The only way they could do that was to get papal commission. Fidel Castro, who a lot of people are saying to suggest that Justin Trudeau of Canada, the Canadian idiot, is Fidel Castro's son. Now, Fidel Castro is of the Farnese bloodline. And what's even more interesting is the fact that California was handed to the branch of the Farnese called Castro in the 1900s. And if you look closely at Canada's current right, we've just gone through that, but Justin Pure James Trudeau, he does have a very stark resemblance to Fidel Castro. So, interesting stuff that we're going on here. And of course, Prince Harry has now been recruited over into Canada. I'm just looking at something at the moment that's showing that they've transferred a lot of what it was Britain into Canada. So it looks like something's going on with Canada in relation to maybe a move of power from Scotland or from England off to Canada for some, which would mean what I've studied in the past in relation to Canada being set up to completely control America is starting to have a bit of teeth here. So maybe we're getting a glimpse of the secret carve up of how they intend to deal with this New World Order control system. The order is headed by a Jesuit superior general and is known as the Black Pope. Now, that might be a bit more revealing than we first might believe, because when you actually look at the title of the head of the Church, the Vatican, he isn't called a Pope. It is not a title that is given to the head of the Catholic Church. He's the Vicar of Christ, and then there's various other titles in relation to Peter, etc. But they're not called a Pope. Okay? They're not called popes. However, the Jesuit Superior General is known as a Pope. Now, when you consider that the Jesuits' main thrust from the beginnings was to control education, hence the great colleges that are all over the world, Jesuit colleges. In my garden, it's called Stonyhurst. Huge things, but it's more Masonic today than it is anything to do with Jesuit, although it's still on. So they're one and the same. So the Superior General is called the Black Pope. However, when you get down to real terms, and so this is the real story, the head of the Catholic Church has never been known as a Pope. So has this term Pope been invented and moved since the emergence of the Jesuits? Because they've been in control of education, so they've formed everything we think we know about history. They're the ones that have given us everything that we think we know today. It's been written by a Jesuit. You know, they've been together for a long time, 1540. It's a long time and a lot of stuff to manipulate. Because the only existing institution that does have its head named as a Pope is the Coptic Church. So when we see oaths to the Pope, and we've seen these blood oaths of the Jesuits, are they actually talking about the head of the Vatican? Obviously, no, they're not. Because when you get into law, Roman law, it's very clear they only use two languages for law, and that's French and English. They're the only two languages that Roman law operates within, nothing else. So, by the grammar of English alone, the term Pope does not refer to the head of the Catholic Church, and never has. Now, back to the seeking of the treasure by the Templars in the Middle East. Now, this is according to Sufi master and historian Sayyid Idris el-Hashami, 1924 to 1996. And he was known as Idris Shah, and he said that the Al-Banna Sufis from Egypt helped the founding Templars to understand and master their archaeological findings from the Temple of Solomon, teaching and training the first Knights Templar during their formative 9 years of excavations. The Egyptian Al-Banna order provided key knowledge of the ancient origins of Christianity, saying, "You may have the cross, but we have the meaning of the cross." What that's telling you, that these Sufis were in control of everything that would come from the Templars. So back to what I said before, I believe that something other than the Hebrew tradition has captured the Hebrew tradition. And what the Jesuits have been famous for since their inception is creating what they call Futurism, which in my opinion is rehashing the tales from the fall of the temple when the Jews destroyed their own temple so that the Romans couldn't get the treasures. That's when the Hebrew tradition in itself ended, because the law had been reinstituted again through Yeshua, and then the temple was destroyed in 70 AD. The Futurism is the idea that they've rehashed that old thing again and made it and turned it into a futuristic event, hence the term Futurism. And this is what the Jesuits have bragged about for centuries, about this is what they promote. But one of the biggest claims and brags was that they said that even though the Reformation has made a serious mess to the power structure in Europe, that they'd install Futurism in it and that it would come back to them at the end, which it has. You won't find more. You can find more Freemasons in Stonehenge College today than you will find any Jesuits. It's that simple. So that prophecy has come full circle. So they installed Futurism into the Reformed idea that will be taken up through Protestantism, and we're very happy that the flock would come back, which they have. And in persuading the Protestants to take on the deceptions of the Schofield Bible, Pope Pius X in 1904 having refuted Theodore Herzl's request to bless the wholesale takeover of Palestine, they then needed the Protestants, because they needed the Christians to actually formulate this entire plan that's brought us to what we're enduring today, which is the shift from Rome to Israel. And because they didn't get the blessing of the church in 1904, they brought forward the Schofield Bible, deceived the Protestants, and basically today the Protestants have basically believed that the Jews, which is rather interesting. I mean, we grew up with all the Protestants. I mean, I didn't have a religious upbringing at all. I was lucky. When I've come to this knowledge in later in life, there has been no script for me to edit. I read what I read and understand it how I understand it. There is nothing to edit. I can see it raw, and I can see what's garbage, and I can see what's not, which is why I suggest, again, this entire script that we've lived for the last 1,000 years is a pure invention called Futurism, and it's a rehashing of what ended 2,000 years ago. So that's my personal impressions from all the doctrines that I've studied over the years. So there you go. The Sufis are claiming to be in control of everything that came forth from the Templars. And I have to say, I would be inclined to see that as still remaining a truth. So I'll leave you with that until the next time.